What would you do if a 9-year-old kid in duct tape boots claimed he could heal your child? And he was right. It was cold that morning in Birmingham, Alabama. Not cold enough to snow, but the kind that made your breath show and your fingertips sting. People rushed in and out of the Children's Medical Center on 7th Avenue, bundled in scarves, clutching coffee cups, moving fast like they could outrun whatever brought them there. But one person wasn't moving. He sat on a flattened cardboard box near the revolving doors, drawing quietly in a weather-beaten notebook. His name was Zeke Carter, just 9 years old. His coat was a size too big, sleeves rolled up, and one of his boots had duct tape across the toe. A red knit beanie rested low on his forehead, barely covering his ears. He didn't beg, didn't ask for help, just sat there watching people come and go. He was there most Saturdays. Some hospital staff had tried to shoo him off when he first started showing up, but after a while, they gave up. Zeke didn't cause trouble. He smiled when spoken to, and when he wasn't sketching in his notebook, he was watching. Always watching. Most folks figured he had a parent inside. Maybe a sick sibling. Maybe he was just waiting for a ride. Nobody asked too many questions. Not in a place like that. Across the street, parked by a fire hydrant, a dark silver Range Rover idled. The engine stayed on, but the driver didn't move. Inside sat Jonathan Reeves, a man in his late 40s with a sharp jawline and graying temples. His tie was loose, his collar wrinkled. He had money. You could see it in the way his car gleamed, even under the hospital's fluorescent lights. But he looked like a man running out of gas. In the back seat, a booster chair held his daughter, Isa, 6 years old, brown curls tucked behind one ear, legs tucked under a pink blanket. Her eyes were wide open, but she didn't say a word. The accident had changed everything. 1 minute, she was climbing trees and racing her cousins in the backyard. The next, she was paralyzed from the waist down, sitting in silence. Jonathan opened the back door, scooped her up carefully, and carried her toward the entrance. He didn't notice Zeke at first. Most people didn't, but Zeke noticed him. He saw the way Jonathan held her like she might fall apart. The way her eyes stayed fixed on the sky, avoiding the building. Zeke stared longer than usual. Then, just before they passed, he stood up and called out, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Jonathan stopped mid-step. Not because he was offended or confused, but because of how the words were said. Not like a sales pitch, not like a joke, just soft, clear, and serious, like Zeke believed it completely. Jonathan turned, eyes narrowed. "What did you just say?" Zeke didn't flinch. He stepped forward, tucking his notebook under his arm. "I said, I can help her walk again." Jonathan stared at him, his arms tightened around Isla. "That's not funny, kid." "I wasn't joking." Zeke's voice didn't shake. There was no smile, just that same quiet tone, a grown-up kind of stillness in a kid's body. Jonathan looked down at Zeke's clothes, his taped-up boot, the cracked lenses of the glasses hanging from the boy's shirt collar. This had to be some weird coincidence, maybe even a scam. He turned and walked inside without another word. But inside, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the kid said it, not with hope, not with doubt, but like it was a fact. But something about that voice stayed stuck in Jonathan's head, and it was going to keep pulling at him until he came back. Jonathan tried to forget about the kid. For the next few hours, he sat through ISA's appointments, nodding through updates from therapists, neurologists, and specialists. All of them using the same phrases they always did: managing expectations, long road ahead, miracles take time. He'd heard it all, but Zeke's words kept repeating in his mind like a stubborn itch. "I can make your daughter walk again." By early afternoon, Jonathan and Isa stepped out of the building. The sun had broken through the clouds, but the cold was still sharp. He walked toward the car, cradling Isla as usual, when he noticed Zeke again, still there. Same box, same notebook. Except this time, he was looking right at Jonathan like he knew he'd come back. Jonathan hesitated. He glanced at Isla. Her head rested on his shoulder, eyes closed. Her body was light, too light for a kid her age. He turned. "You again," he muttered, walking over. "Why would you say something like that? You think this is funny?" Zeke shook his head slowly. "No, sir." "You don't even know her," Jonathan snapped, lowering Isa gently into the back seat. "You don't know what she's been through. You don't know what we've been through." Zeke didn't back down. "I don't have to know her to help." Jonathan straightened up. "You're what, 9? Almost 10 exactly. You're a little boy sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on your shoes. What could you possibly know about helping someone like my daughter?" Zeke looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of his notebook. "My mama used to help people walk again," he said quietly. "She was a physical therapist. She taught me stuff. She said the body remembers things, even when it forgets for a while." Jonathan stared at him, the skepticism hardening in his chest. "So what? You watched her do some stretches and now you think you're a doctor?" "I watched her help a man walk after being in a chair for 5 years," Zeke said, eyes lifting. "She didn't have machines or nurses, just her hands, her patience, and faith." Jonathan opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. He glanced around. A nurse passed by, giving Zeke a small wave. A janitor from the hospital nodded in the boy's direction. They all seemed to know him. "I'm not giving you money," Jonathan said. "I didn't ask for money." "Then what do you want?" Zeke took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Just 1 hour. Let me show you." Jonathan looked back at Isla, who had now opened her eyes and was watching both of them quietly. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I should walk away right now." Zeke didn't move. "I should call security," Jonathan added. Still, the boy stayed silent. Jonathan finally huffed. "Fine. You want to waste your time, kid? Meet us at Harrington Park tomorrow, noon. Don't be late." Zeke nodded once. "I'll be there." Jonathan climbed into the SUV, started the engine, and pulled off without looking back. But in the rear-view mirror, Zeke was still standing there, hands at his sides, face unreadable. Back at home after dinner, Jonathan sat in his home office. Papers were spread across his desk. None of them made sense. He kept thinking about the way Zeke stood there like he knew something. Isla poked her head into the room. "Daddy?" she asked. He turned. "Yeah, baby." "Who was that boy?" Jonathan paused. "Just somebody we met outside the hospital. He looked like he believed it," she said. "Believed what?" "That I could walk." He stared at her, lips parting slightly. She smiled just barely and walked her fingers across the armrest of her wheelchair like they were legs. But Jonathan wasn't smiling because for the first time in a long time, something inside him didn't feel numb. It felt dangerous, like hope. Harrington Park was the kind of place most people passed by without a second glance. A cracked basketball court, a few swings with chains that squeaked, and a patch of grass that tried to be a soccer field. On Sundays, it was usually empty, especially around noon. But that day, Zeke was already there, sitting on the bench closest to the big oak tree. He wore the same oversized jacket, but his notebook was tucked away. Instead, he had a small gym bag at his feet, and a folded towel on the bench beside him. At 12:07, Jonathan's SUV pulled up. He didn't say anything at first, just got Isla out, set her gently in her wheelchair, and wheeled her over to where Zeke sat. He didn't make eye contact. His arms were crossed tight like he was already regretting being there. Zeke stood up when they arrived. "Hi again," he said politely. Jonathan gave a stiff nod. Isla waved shyly. Zeke smiled at her. "Hi, Isa." Her eyes lit up a little. "Hi." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "How do you know her name?" "You said it yesterday," Zeke replied. "I remember stuff." Jonathan didn't respond. He just gestured at the towel. "So what now? Magic carpet ride?" Zeke ignored the jab. "No, sir. Just the basics." He opened his bag and pulled out a pair of socks, a tennis ball, a small jar of cocoa butter, and a plastic container filled with what looked like warm rice wrapped in cloth. Jonathan squinted. "What is all that stuff my mom used?" Zeke answered. "The rice is for heat. Helps loosen tight muscles. The ball is for pressure points." Jonathan folded his arms again. Zeke turned to Isla. "If it's okay, can I work with your legs for a little while? Nothing hurts. I promise. And if anything feels weird, just say stop." "Okay." Isa looked up at her dad. He sighed. "You can try. Just be careful." Zeke knelt down beside her chair. He gently unwrapped the blanket from her legs and placed the warm cloth rice pack over her thighs. Isa flinched slightly. "Too hot?" he asked. She shook her head. "It feels good." Zeke nodded and waited. After a few minutes he began to gently move her legs. Not yanking, not forcing, just small rotations side to side, up and down. Jonathan watched closely, ready to jump in if something went wrong. But nothing did. "You ever do this before?" he asked, suspicious. Zeke didn't look up. "My mama used to take me to shelters after school. She helped veterans, folks who couldn't afford therapy. Said, everybody deserves to feel human again. I used to carry her bag." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "And she taught you this stuff?" "Yeah," said the body don't always need fancy, just attention." He tapped lightly on Isla's knee with his knuckle. "You feel that?" "No," she whispered. Zeke nodded again, unfazed. "That's okay. I'll keep asking." He kept talking to her while working, asking about her favorite colors, her favorite food, what shows she liked to watch. At first, her answers were short, but then she started asking him questions. "Do you live around here?" "Kind of." "Do you go to school?" "I used to." "Why not anymore?" Zeke hesitated. "My mom got sick, then she passed. Been trying to figure things out since." Isa looked down. "I'm sorry." Zeke gave her a small smile. "Thanks." Jonathan's posture softened slightly, but he didn't speak. After about 30 minutes, Zeke gently tapped her ankle again. "You feel that?" Isa blinked. "A little like pressure." Zeke looked up at Jonathan. "That's good." Jonathan squinted. "She sometimes says that during her regular sessions." "Yeah," Zeke replied. "But those sessions are inside a room full of machines. Sometimes kids get scared of machines. They tighten up. But here," he gestured to the open park. "There's air. Trees. Feels different." Jonathan didn't say anything, but he was definitely listening now. Zeke helped Isla stretch both legs, then gave her some simple movements to try with her toes. Just wiggling. She tried. Nothing obvious happened, but she didn't look discouraged. "I'll show you again next week," Zeke said, standing up. "It takes time, but your muscles." He pointed to her thighs. "They still remember how to be used. You just got to remind them." Isa smiled bigger this time. "Okay." Jonathan cleared his throat. "We're not promising anything," he said quickly. Zeke nodded. "I'm not either. I'm just trying." Jonathan stared at him for a long second. Then, without warning, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded bill, and held it out. Zeke stepped back. "No, sir, I don't want your money." Jonathan looked surprised. "Then why are you doing this?" Zeke shrugged. "Because your daughter smiled." Jonathan looked down at Isla. She was still smiling. But he didn't understand how a boy who had lost everything could give so much to a girl he barely knew. The following Sunday was warmer, but Zeke still wore his jacket. Not because he needed it, but because it made him feel like his mom was close. She used to call it his helper's coat. Said every good healer needed something that reminded them why they care. He was already at Harrington Park again by 11:45. Towel laid out, supplies lined up, and a bottle of water sitting beside him. A few kids played basketball on the court. Nearby, and someone's dog barked in the distance. At exactly noon, Jonathan's SUV rolled up. Isla was grinning before the car even stopped. Zeke waved at her. "Hi, Isa." "Hi," she chirped, her curls bouncing as Jonathan helped her into the wheelchair. Jonathan looked tired again, but different this time, less weighed down. He gave Zeke a small nod, no words, but it was more than last week. Zeke got to work. Same setup, same more cloth pack, but this time something had shifted. Isa was trying now. "Can you press your heel into the ground?" Zeke asked gently. She closed her eyes, concentrating. Nothing happened. "It's okay," he said. "Sometimes it takes your brain a while to find the right path. It's like trying to walk through a crowd. You just got to push through." Jonathan stood behind them, arms crossed again, but this time more to keep warm than to wall himself off. "Why do you do all this?" he asked suddenly. Zeke glanced up. "Because I remember what it felt like when my mom used to help people. She made them feel like they mattered. I want to do that too." Jonathan nodded slowly. "You ever think about doing something else?" "Sometimes," Zeke said, "but this feels right." Jonathan looked at Isla. She was tapping her toes barely, but they moved. For the first time, he didn't speak. He just watched. The next few weekends they kept coming. Same time, same place. Zeke taught Isla how to use rubber bands to strengthen her ankles. He rolled tennis balls under her feet to help her brain remember where they were. He showed Jonathan how to massage pressure points behind her knees and explained how each nerve had a job to do even when it went quiet. And then came the bad day. It was the fourth Sunday. Zeke showed up like always. But when the SUV pulled up, Isa wasn't smiling. Her eyes were red. Jonathan looked angry. "She doesn't want to do it today," he said sharply as he lifted her into the chair. Isa refused to look at either of them. Zeke approached slowly. "What happened?" Isa crossed her arms. "I tried to move my legs this morning and nothing happened. Nothing. I'm tired of trying. It's pointless." Jonathan looked away, jaw tight. "She's been frustrated all weekend." Zeke nodded. He kneeled beside her again. "You think I never get tired?" She didn't answer. "You think I didn't sit in a shelter and cry when my mom couldn't afford medicine and I had to just sit there and watch?" Her eyes shifted toward him. "You're allowed to be mad. I'm mad sometimes, too. But if you stop now, the part of you that wants to walk might stop trying too." She stared at the ground. "I don't want you to give up," he said softly. "Because I haven't." Silence. Then Isla whispered, "I'm scared." Jonathan turned. That was the first time she'd said that out loud. Zeke leaned in closer. "I am too, but scared don't mean stop. It just means you're close to something big." Isa wiped her face. "Okay, let's try again." And they did. Zeke guided her through the motions gently with less talking this time, just presence, patience. Jonathan stepped in more too, helping her shift weight, encouraging every small twitch. After 30 minutes, Isla moved her right foot. Not a toe, her whole foot. It slid forward slow and stiff, but it moved. Jonathan knelt down beside her, blinking like he wasn't sure he'd seen it right. "Do it again," he said. She did. Zeke smiled, but didn't say anything. He just sat back and watched. Later that night, Jonathan stood outside his house on Crestview Drive, staring at the moon. He'd stopped asking himself who Zeke really was. The question didn't matter anymore. Inside, Isla was giggling, retelling the foot slide moment to her aunt on speakerphone. For the first time in 6 months, their house didn't feel like a hospital room. It felt like home again. But something inside Jonathan had started to shift. Not just his daughter's legs, but the weight in his own chest, the guilt, the pride, the wall he'd built between himself and the world. It was cracking. Monday afternoon, Jonathan sat in his office staring at an untouched contract. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Emails, calls, client updates, but none of it felt urgent anymore. What kept looping in his mind was that moment in the park. Isa's foot sliding forward like it belonged to her again. He'd seen it with his own eyes. And the person who made it happen was a 9-year-old with taped-up boots, and no last name he'd ever heard before. He opened a new browser tab and typed Zeke Carter Birmingham. Nothing came up except a few scattered results. He clicked through old local newsletters and school databases. A few mentions of Zeke and his mother, Monique Carter, at a community clinic. No address, no recent info. He shut the laptop and leaned back. This kid was a ghost. Except he wasn't. By Saturday, they were back at Harrington Park, but things felt different now. Jonathan brought an extra mat and a fold-out chair. He handed Zeke a sandwich when they arrived. Didn't say anything about it, just placed it beside his gym bag. Zeke gave a small thanks and tucked it away for later. "Ready, Isa?" he asked. She gave a big thumbs up. "Let's do it." They got into the routine. Heat packs, stretches, toe flexes. Today, Jonathan joined in fully. He sat cross-legged on the grass, doing each motion, Zeke explained. "Even messed it up once." "You're bending the wrong way," Zeke said with a grin. Jonathan gave him a side eye. "I haven't stretched since college." They laughed. "Even Isla." About 20 minutes in, Zeke leaned forward. "All right, Isa, let's try something different." He unfolded a belt from his bag and placed it under her knees, showing Jonathan how to hold each end. "She's going to try to lift both knees now, just a little. We help. Balance her. She controls the movement." Jonathan blinked. "You sure?" Zeke nodded. "She's ready." They gave her a few seconds. Her brow tightened, eyes narrowed. She grunted softly and then her knees lifted slightly, barely an inch, but they lifted. Jonathan looked at her, stunned. "You did that?" She smiled. "I did it." He swallowed hard. "You really did it." Zeke nodded slowly, eyes on the belt. "See, the body remembers. You just have to be patient enough to let it talk." Jonathan looked at him. "You're something else, kid." Zeke didn't respond. Just started gently guiding Isla through the next stretch. After the session, as they packed up, Jonathan crouched beside Zeke. "Where do you go after this?" Zeke shrugged. "Around." Jonathan lowered his voice. "You got a place to sleep?" Zeke hesitated, then said, "Sometimes." Jonathan exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You ever think about coming to stay with us for a while?" Zeke's eyes widened. "You serious?" "I got a guest room. You wouldn't be in the way." Zeke looked down at his hands. "You sure your neighbors wouldn't mind a kid like me?" Jonathan gave a short laugh. "Man, after what you've done for my daughter, they'd better not say a word." Zeke didn't answer right away, but Jonathan could see the wheels turning. The next morning, Zeke stood outside Jonathan's home, backpack slung over one shoulder, a rolled-up blanket tucked under his arm. Jonathan opened the door in sweatpants and a coffee mug in hand. "Right on time," he said. Isa ran to the front hallway. "Zeke," he smiled. "Hey, superstar." Jonathan stepped aside. "Welcome home." The days that followed were quiet but meaningful. Zeke got his own room, a soft bed, clean sheets, and a small desk. He didn't say much, but he never missed a morning stretch with Isa. She was moving both feet now, not walking yet, but the wheels were turning. Her brain was reaching out to her legs like it remembered the connection. One night, as Jonathan cleaned dishes, he paused and leaned on the counter. "Zeke," he said over his shoulder, "you ever think about going back to school?" Zeke, who was sketching at the kitchen table, glanced up sometimes. Jonathan nodded. "You're smart. You could go far." Zeke tilted his head. "I want to help people walk again like my mama did." Jonathan turned to face him. "Then let's figure out how to get you there." Zeke gave a small smile. "Okay." They didn't say much more that night. They didn't need to. But for the first time in years, the Reeves household wasn't full of silence. It was full of small noises that meant life, footsteps, laughter, scribbles, and healing. It started with a nurse from the Children's Medical Center. She was walking her dog through Harrington Park one Sunday morning and spotted a familiar face, Isla. She hadn't seen her outside her wheelchair in months, let alone smiling, lifting her knees, moving her toes. And standing beside her was the same quiet kid who used to sit by the hospital doors every weekend. She didn't interrupt, just watched from a distance for a while. Then she went home and told her sister, who happened to work in patient services. A few days later, a physical therapist at the hospital mentioned to Jonathan, "Hey, someone told me ISA's improving. That true?" Jonathan nodded. "Yeah. Thanks to someone we weren't expecting." Word spread fast. The next time they showed up to Harrington Park, 2 other families were waiting at the bench near the big oak tree. One had a boy who used a walker. The other, a girl recovering from a stroke. Both parents had heard about the kid who helped the Reeves girl move her legs again. Zeke looked at Jonathan. Jonathan looked right back at him. "You don't have to," he said quietly. Zeke adjusted the strap on his bag. "I want to." He gave up his usual time with Isla that day to work with the 2 new kids. He showed their parents how to use the same towel stretches, how to warm the rice packs just right, how to encourage without pushing too hard. And he talked to the kids, not at them. "You're not broken," he told one of them. "You're just learning a different way to be strong." Isa watched everything from her wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't complain once. Later that afternoon on the drive home, she said, "I like watching him help people." Jonathan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Yeah, it makes me feel like I'm part of something good." He smiled. By the next weekend, 5 families showed up. The week after that, it was 11 o'clock. A local pastor brought folding chairs. A nearby diner started dropping off bagels and coffee. Somebody printed flyers that read, "Free movement classes, Sundays at noon. Harrington Park." They didn't mention Zeke's name, but everyone knew who it was. A local reporter showed up with a camera and a notepad. Jonathan pulled Zeke aside. "You okay with this?" Zeke looked around at the families, at the kids moving their limbs, at Akla laughing with a girl on a walker. He nodded. "As long as it's not about me, it's about them." The reporter wrote her piece. It ran on the second page of the Birmingham Sunday Post under the headline, "9-year-old with a gift helps dozens heal in a city park." They didn't share his full name. Zeke asked them not to, but people found out anyway. A local doctor offered to mentor him. A nonprofit asked if they could fund some equipment. Someone else offered free tutoring. For the first time since his mother passed, people didn't just look at Zeke, they saw him. But Zeke never bragged. He still laid out the towel the same way every Sunday. Still used the same duct tape boots, still checked in with Isla first before helping anyone else. But now the park that once echoed with silence and sore bodies had become a place filled with movement, and a boy who had no home had become the heart of something bigger than himself. It had been 9 Sundays. 9 Sundays of towels laid on grass. Of Isa's knees lifting higher. Of small victories shared with strangers who'd become something closer to family. But this Sunday was different. Zeke could feel it before they even pulled up to the park. The air was warmer. The trees swayed a little slower. Even Isa was quieter in the back seat, focused, almost like she was preparing for something big. When they arrived, a small crowd had already formed. Nothing loud or flashy, just families setting up folding chairs, therapists kneeling in front of kids, parents with hopeful eyes, and right in the middle of it all was that same worn-out bench under the oak tree. Zeke didn't say anything at first, just unpacked his bag, rolled out the towel, and gave Isla a look. "You ready?" She nodded. No smile. Just that look again, serious. Determined. Jonathan wheeled her to the center of the mat. Zeke knelt in front of her. "Same as before," he said softly. "We help you stand. You do the rest." Jonathan moved behind her and placed his hands under her arms. Zeke took her legs, guiding them gently into place. "Okay," Zeke whispered. "On 3. She closed her eyes. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan lifted. Zeke steadied her knees and then she stood. Her legs trembled. Her arms shook, but she was up on her own 2 feet. The crowd fell silent. Some kids gasped. One mother clapped a hand over her mouth. Isa opened her eyes slowly and smiled. "I'm standing." Zeke blinked back something in his eyes. "Yeah, you are." Jonathan froze for a second like he couldn't breathe. Then he let go. She stayed up. He stepped back, shaking. She's doing it." Zeke stepped back too, just a little. "She's been doing it." Isa took one shaky step, then another, and then because she was 6 and brave and didn't know how to be afraid, she took a 3rd step, all on her own before falling into her father's arms. He caught her laughing, crying, his hands trembling as he held her. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Isa turned to Zeke. "You said I would?" He gave her a small grin. "I said we'd try." That afternoon, nobody left the park in a hurry. People stayed, talked, hugged, some prayed. Zeke sat back on the bench and watched it all. He didn't say much. He never did. Later that night, Jonathan stood in the kitchen while Zeke poured cereal in a bowl. "You know, you changed everything," he said. Zeke didn't look up. "I did." Jonathan walked over and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "My daughter walked today, and not because of a hospital or a doctor or a miracle drug. She walked because a kid with nothing decided to show up again and again, even when nobody asked him to." Zeke nodded. "That's what my mom would have done." Jonathan's throat tightened. "I wish she could have seen this." "She did," Zeke said softly. "I think she sees everything." Jonathan wiped his eyes. "Zeke," he said quietly, "you're going to change a lot of lives." Zeke looked up at him. "I already am. There are people in this world who might not have fancy degrees, shiny resumes, or a perfect past, but they carry something far more valuable. Heart, grit, and a reason to keep showing up. Sometimes the most broken people are the ones holding the tools to help others heal. If this story moved you, don't just keep it to yourself, share it. And if you know a kid like Zeke or a girl like Isla, tell them this. You matter. You're needed.